more on the importance of this bilateral relationship, let me turn to Neysun Mahboubi. He's the director of the Penn Project on the future of U.S.-China relations at University of Pennsylvania. Neysun, welcome to the program. You know this relationship well. You know China well. You speak Mandarin fluently and just recently came back from a trip to China. I want to get to that in a moment. But talking, of course, is always a positive step when you're talking about the world's two largest economies. The fact that these discussions in such a high-profile setting happen is a measure of success on its own. But I got to ask you whether you believe it will change the trajectory of U.S.-China relations in long term.
Yeah, that's a great question. I really want to underscore the point that you just suggested and that Nathan King suggested earlier, that this meeting in many ways went about as well as the political environment could permit it to go. And I understand why many people, probably on both sides and both governments, are relatively pleased with how the meeting went. But we also need to be thinking about those more fundamental, deep-seated drivers that have brought the U.S. and China into a more confrontational relationship, and whether a meeting like this, however well it went in the particular context of this moment, can change those dynamics. And I think for that, there's a reason to be skeptical. The meeting did result in a few well-reported, relatively high-profile agreements on military-to-military exchange and on the fentanyl supply, but there's a lot of other issues that are bedeviling the relationship. And it's clear that they made much progress on those issues. And so that, I think, is one of the reasons why we might be cautious in thinking that there's some fundamental shift in this more confrontational relationship that we've seen emerge in the past few years.
Yeah, not many details about disputes like tariffs, tech restrictions, export controls. Are these issues something that they just may have to agree to disagree on, or is this something that you think may come down the road now that the dialogue or lines of communications at least have reopened?
You know, what the Biden administration clearly has been trying to push forward, and the Chinese government seems to be starting to accept, is this idea that the overall framework going forward will be one of a deeply competitive relationship that still managed well, that has certain guardrails. That's the theoretical construct that the Biden administration has been suggesting. If that construct is workable, if the Chinese agree to it, then the question will be, what are the issues that fall within the bucket of this is a deeply competitive relationship, and what are the issues that fall within the buckets of these are the things we're being careful about? And the particular things you listed, I tend to think still fall under the bucket of competitive relationship. But maybe, depends on exactly how that calibration the two governments decide they want to set, whether those kinds of issues will be things they can make headway on, or whether they just stay within the realm of this is what makes this a very deeply competitive relationship going forward.
And these two men, these two countries, obviously there's a lot of issues they do not see eye to eye on. But one thing that at least became abundantly clear to many people around the world, including someone who's still learning a lot about China-U.S. relations, is the fact that these two men do not want to see conflict between their two countries.
I think absolutely that is very clear. I think that has always been clear, but perhaps their attention to the possibility of conflict has been focused recently because they saw how bad the relationship was going. I'm sure that the fact that there's all these other conflicts popping up around the world right now, including in Ukraine, including in Israel-Palestine, that also has an impact on the way they are thinking about whether or not it makes any degree of sense for these two countries to have real conflict with one another. So that is part of the managing the relationship well part of the equation that I think both governments are very, very clear-sighted about right now. But of course, I think for those of us like myself who have had a long history of engaging with China, simply avoiding outright conflict may not be all we want to see out of this relationship. Of course, avoiding outright conflict is a positive thing. But if that's all we're getting out of the relationship, then I think there's a lot that's left there that is very sad to lose.
And Neysun, I want to get back now to your trip to China recently. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was your first trip back since the COVID-19 pandemic. You wrote eloquently about the importance of people-to-people exchanges. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, this is the issue that I have staked out the most public positions myself of the importance, especially of scholarly exchange. As a legal scholar, I think it's incredibly important for my legal scholarship community to have in-person exchange once again. Other scholarly communities, I think that's just as important, if not more so, and also people exchange generally. I think it was good that Xi Jinping's presentation at this dinner organized by the National Committee of U.S.-China Relations ended up focusing on people-to-people exchange, was, as I understand it, one of the friendliest versions of the speech that he could have delivered. And my hope is that that sends a very strong signal throughout the Chinese governmental system that the very, very top leader has endorsed a robust return to scholarly and people-to-people exchange. And if that message is heard, then all these different obstacles that have arisen over the past few years to that kind of exchange, hopefully, will diminish very quickly.
I will leave it on that positive note. Neysun Mahboubi, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.